Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have very big news coming out of Russia. Today we've gotten word from Vladimir Putin himself that a brand new mass mobilization has started inside of Russia, with over 160,000 Russian civilians being drafted into the military to get ready to go fight inside of Ukraine. So that is a very big development happening today. And also on another front, we've heard that the US president is reportedly very angry and very pissed off at Vladimir Putin over his recent bad faith negotiations involving the war in Ukraine. So that is another bombshell piece of news. And we also have word as well coming from Murmansk, Russia, that an armed gunman has decided to start attacking civilians in Murmansk, and the Russians claim to have taken that individual out, but we're not sure exactly what the individual's motive was, but we have all the news we have right now here on the video. And also on our last front of news, we have news coming out of Iran that Iran is threatening to attack Diego Garcia, which houses American B-2 bombers, over recent aggressions toward their country. So we have very big news to cover today, and let's jump into our first post, which goes to War Translated. And this is our biggest piece of news of the day. Currently, we've gotten word from Putin himself that he signed a brand new decree for a spring military draft, and right here we actually have a copy of it in Russian, as you can see right here on the screen, and also we do have a copy of it in English. And basically, to sum this all up, Putin is not pursuing peace. This is not something you do if you want peace. This is something you do if you're going all in, which of course we've been saying that for quite some time. Putin is going all the way in, and this brand new military draft is proof of that, and hopefully this will open some more eyes as to exactly what Putin is planning to do inside of Ukraine. And of course, it's not going for peace, it's going for more conflict, and as we can see it right here, there is proof of it. But to get some more information about this decree, this post right here goes to Polymarket Intel, and as we can see in this post, Putin has ordered 160,000 more Russians to be called up for military service in the spring draft decree that he just signed a moment ago. So this is a very bad sign once again. That is a pretty large deployment of troops right there, and just even more Russian civilians being dragged up off the streets and put right into the meat grinder that's been going on in Ukraine for several years now. So that is a very big sign of what Putin is planning to do in the very near future. But we have gotten another piece of news here, and this one goes to War Translated. And I want you all to remember that allegedly there was a phone call scheduled between the US president and the Russian president to take place sometime this upcoming week. But so far, we have now heard a statement from the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov that apparently there is no phone call scheduled between the two leaders, and we currently have a statement from Peskov right here on the video, so let's take a look and see exactly what he said. And Peskov says, now there's no charted phone call, but I'll say it again. President Putin remains open to such communication, and if necessary, such a conversation can be agreed upon very quickly. So there it is. That is Peskov saying that. And once again, I'm not sure if the phone call was scheduled in the first place or maybe it was canceled. I'm not really sure, and of course we don't have those details, but Peskov is saying right here that there is indeed no phone call scheduled. So I'm beginning to wonder why that is the case, because the reports indicated that a phone call was going to take place. But in our next post, which goes to the Spectator Index, we learn a little bit more details which might lead to the conclusion of why this is the case. And we can see right here in this post that the US president says he is very angry and quote-unquote pissed off at Putin and threatens to put secondary tariffs on oil and all oil coming out of Russia. So that is a very big one right here. Of course, one of the first statements we've ever heard indicating any type of real strong anger toward Putin by the US president, and that is a very big shift right there. Of course, a few days ago we said that after the ceasefire situation kind of fell apart, that might mark a shift into a bad relation between the Russian president and the United States president, but of course we weren't really sure at the moment, but this is more proof that apparently things are starting to go sideways very quickly, and that is not a good sign whatsoever when it comes to the Russians trying to get one over on America. So it looks like things are changing for the better as of right now. But jumping into our next post, this one goes to Military News Ukraine. And this post right here provides some more confirmation as to what the last post said, and we can hear a statement from the Finnish President Alexander Stubb that after he spoke to the US president, he says that the US is indeed preparing sanctions against the Russian Federation if it does not cease fire in Ukraine, and according to him, the US president is extremely irritated by the actions of the Russian Federation and its manipulations and the delay in the negotiation process, and he explained this is typical behavior. First they agree and then they set new conditions. And the Finnish president is actually very much on point because of course we've been saying this for a long time. The Russian strategy is deception. They will pretend like they're going along with negotiations negotiations, and then they'll set new conditions just like he mentioned, and then they'll back out of everything and keep going with whatever they want to do in the first place. So that is exactly what the Russians are doing right now, and it sounds like the US president is getting very privy to that, which is a very good sign, by the way, because of course Russia needs to have sanctions put on them to cripple their economy to end the war faster inside of Ukraine. And I think with sanctions being put on that country, that will hasten the end of the Ukraine war in Ukraine's favor. So hopefully that will be the case. But as we can hear right here, the Finnish president is saying that that is indeed what the president said in his own words. So very interesting to hear. But jumping onto our next post, this one goes to OSINT Technical. And this is another big story right here. Pretty much ever since the ceasefire talks ended, which is over the last week, U.S. military aid flights to Ukraine have jumped dramatically, with 747 freighters delivering supplies from a number of locations. And as we can see right here, there's been 2 from McGuire, 3 from Joint Base Charleston, as well as 1 from Ramstein, as well as 1 from MacDill, and 1 from Biggs. And we can see right here on the flight radar, there's the tracking of these supply flights to Poland to deliver that aid into Ukraine. So regardless of what you're hearing in the media, the supplies for Ukraine are actually ramping up, and that is a very good sign that the U.S. is committed to actually making sure Ukraine wins the war, because they're starting to realize that Putin is not playing fair, and once again, he's not going to negotiate in good faith. So that is a very promising sign for Ukraine, and once again, I'm very glad to see it. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to AZ Intel. And moving away from our story about the mass mobilization and also the new U.S. shift toward Russia, we've also gotten another big story here, and this one comes out of Murmansk, Russia. As we can see right here, gunfire was heard as authorities in Murmansk respond to an assailant firing from a rooftop, and there's been no word on casualties, but this was a pretty large attack, and we're not sure exactly who this individual was, but there was a pretty large attack, and we can only assume maybe it was a angry Russian soldier or something like that. We're really not sure, but let's take a look at the video and see what we can spot in this video. And as we can see, it looks like there's Murmansk. There's some authorities right there on the ground. And very faintly, you can hear gunfire going off in the background. And there's a very large police presence right down there on the right side of the screen. And as you can see, this individual's taking photos up close, and there are some more, it looks like, trucks in the ground, maybe police, first responders, and they are all responding to this incident. But as you can see, a pretty large attack, and you can hear the gunfire very slightly in the background. So that is the first piece of news on it. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to World Source News 24/7. And in this post right here, we learned that about 2 hours after this incident started, apparently the gunman was taken down by the Murmansk Wolverine and Oman Bear units of the Russian National Guard, and the individual was eliminated. So it looks like he was not taken into custody. Most likely he was, according to the authorities, eliminated. And once again, we may never know why this individual went crazy or why this was sparked in the first place, but another pretty big atrocity happening here in Murmansk for some unknown reason. But that's a pretty big story happening as well. And moving away from that story and onto our next one, this one goes to Nexta. And we've gotten some news coming out of Italy today that apparently an unidentified drone was spotted over an EU research center in Italy, and it's believed to be a Russian reconnaissance UAV, and at least 5 flyovers were recorded above the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in the town of Ispra, and after each flight, the drone then vanished, and the center hosts experts in nuclear energy, security, and space technologies, and additionally, the facilities of the defense company Leonardo are located nearby. So I'll be honest with you, this sounds very, very reminiscent of the drone spottings over the New England area inside of America, but I'm not really sure if these are connected, but the same sort of like anecdotal evidence here of a drone showing up that's unidentified and then vanishing into thin air and disappearing. And apparently the authorities in Italy believe this was a Russian recon drone trying to come in and do research on this nuclear energy facility. So very disturbing to hear, and once again, somehow these drones are making their way into our EU airspace, and they're not being detected until the very last second when they're over a target. So that is not good to hear, and once again, waiting for more details about that story. But with that, we're now moving on to our next post here, and this one goes to the Kyiv Post. And we got this piece of news very early this morning, and in fact, this might be old news by this point, because of course we just got news about, I would say 30 minutes to an hour ago, about this mass mobilization that is going to be taking place inside of Russia, so this might be old news. But this morning, some unnamed officials inside of Ukraine reportedly said that preparations are underway for elections after a full ceasefire is introduced, which the U.S. hopes could happen by April. And once again, this was stated before this information about the mobilization, so I'm not sure if this is the case any longer, but that was what we were hearing right now. But we also got some contradiction to to this piece of news in our next post here, which goes to null reports. And the presidential office of Ukraine did deny those reports and said that Ukraine's government is not preparing for elections, and there was no such meeting or directive from Zelensky, according to the president's office. So that did contradict it, and honestly, whatever the case is, whichever story is accurate, I have a feeling that the elections will not be taking place because, once again, Ukraine will probably be embroiled in this war for many years to come because Russia is not backing down, and there's been no sign that they're willing to agree to a ceasefire in any good faith negotiations. So this is probably a moot point, but once again, that is some of the reports coming out of the president's office inside of Ukraine this morning. But jumping into our next post, this one goes to Nexta once again. And we can see right here in this post that the peace-loving Russia does not love peace so much because apparently during the night last night, Ukraine was attacked by 131 Russian drones, and air defense forces shot down 57 of them, while another 45 were lost from radar without causing any damage, and the attack affected Sumy, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kyiv, and Zhytomyr in those regions. And also in Kharkiv, the Russian forces targeted industrial facilities, and at least 6 explosions were heard in the city. So of course, there was some damage, I believe, in Kharkiv, but that was the only place that there was reported damage, and the Russian attack largely failed as 45 of the drones simply went haywire and just went off into random locations, and they weren't even tracked on radar according to the reports. So once again, just showing that Russia does not want peace whatsoever, and that is more proof of it right here from Nexta. But moving into our next post, this one also goes to Nexta, and we heard of a pretty big goof up by the Russians this morning. A Russian pilot dropped an aerial bomb on a cemetery in Russia's Belgorod region, and this is pretty peak stupidity right here. They're dropping bombs on their own territory and in the worst places, actually, right in a cemetery. So let's take a look at the video and see this mess up on camera. And there it is, look at that, a big piece of munition going off right there in a cemetery in Belgorod, Russia, and that was done by Russians themselves. So that is peak stupidity, and once again, the Russians, known for their horrible targeting abilities, are hitting their own targets at this point. So that is quite crazy to see right there on the video, and another big mess up by the goofy Russians. But moving on to our next post, this one's going to go to, guess who, Nexta once again. And moving away from our Ukraine-Russia news and onto our Middle Eastern news, we do have some pretty big stories coming out of Iran, and today we've heard that Iran puts its missiles on combat readiness, and apparently they've all been placed on combat readiness and underground bases and launchers across all cities. They're on full combat alert, and they could be launched in the event of an escalation from the US, according to the Iranian outlet called the Tehran Times. So that's not shocking whatsoever. Iran is really shaking in their boots right now because, of course, we are amassing B-2 bombers in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, and presumably getting ready to strike Iran if they don't strike a deal with the US over the next month or so. So they are getting scared and are trying to get ready to defend their country in any way they can possibly do it right now, as we see in the post. But also, moving on to our next one, this one goes to open source intel. And instead of talking or trying to make a deal with the United States, it looks like Iran is going to make another big mistake, and now they're threatening a warning to the United States and saying that if an attack is ordered on Iran, then Tehran will retaliate by striking the US-UK naval base on Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands, and the base currently hosts multiple B-2 bombers. And as you can see right here from the satellite footage, there are some B-2s sitting outside, and there's also presumably some more under the shelters over here, for a total of 5 to 7 that are currently at the base, and that of course is a big show of force by the United States, and now Iran has seen that, and the message has been sent, and Iran is threatening to strike that naval base and try to eliminate the B-2s. And once again, that is a bad move by Iran, because of course the United States might take preemptive action to prevent that from occurring now that it has been threatened out in the open. So just a ton of bad moves by Iran, but that pretty much wraps up our news right now coming from Iran. So moving on to our last post of the day, this one's going to go to OSINT Defender. And we do have some news, some very unfortunate news coming out of Lithuania, as today we have gotten more word about the US soldiers that went missing, the 4 US soldiers that went missing close to the Belarusian border. And today we've heard that according to a senior US defense official in Europe, the bodies of 3 of the missing crew members from the US Army Hercules armored recovery vehicle that went missing last Tuesday were extracted this morning from a swamp at the Pribrat training ground in eastern Lithuania, and they've been found deceased. And while the 4th remains missing at this time, the search and recovery teams are searching through the nearby swamp while divers search the mud and water the M88 was extracted from this morning. So, of course, this vehicle was deep in the mud, and apparently, unfortunately, and very disturbingly, the soldiers did drown inside the vehicle, which is not good to hear, and of course, condolences to the families of the soldiers, and that's a very sad story to hear. And the missing soldier is likely somewhere in the water that has still not been recovered. So, a very unfortunate training accident, and once again, it's just a very sad story all the way around. So, our condolences from from the Enforcer channel. But with that, folks, that is actually our last piece of news for the day. So if you found today's video informative, smack that like button and also subscribe to the channel as well for more daily short war updates just like this one about the wars around the world and any conflicts that might be brewing at any point in time. Also, by the way, if you want to support the channel financially, you can do so on our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go over there and sign up for a monthly membership and support the channel that way, which is a very big help. And also, huge shout out to our Patreon supporters once again for making this all possible here on the channel. We do sincerely appreciate that. And be sure to join us again on Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. The Enforcer is currently on a bit of a business trip, and he will be back on Wednesday, and that's when we'll be conducting our next nightly live stream about the wars around the world. So be sure to join us for that one on Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. But with that, folks, we'll see you all in the next one, and with that, bye-bye for now.